Hello, this is Matt on the Moon Family Sedan channel. I don't enjoy being the bearer of bad news, but it is possible that once there's a conclusion in the SEC v. Ripple case, that XRP will not be relisted on exchanges in the United States as a result of it. That's an actual possible outcome. Now, why might that happen? Well, if it's not clear from a legal perspective whether or not XRP itself is a security, then exchanges may just not relist XRP. Which means, in fact, so while all sorts of people out there, including myself, are optimistic and still do think that the most probable outcome is that when this is settled, and I don't mean settling in the literal sense, but once there's a conclusion, that there's going to be some sort of ultimate clarity for XRP. I do remain that optimism. And that would just cause XRP to absolutely skyrocket in price. But I absolutely acknowledge if we don't have clarity, if say Ripple loses and also we don't get clarity for XRP specifically, the opposite might happen. We might see the price of XRP absolutely plummet. To what degree, I don't pretend to know, but it could be pretty dramatic. And here's the thing. Like, it's not unreasonable to think that it might happen. I'm optimistic. I don't think that's the most probable outcome. And it would be, to me, it would feel devastating. After going through this for 2.5 years, and then understanding that there's, it happens because there's not sufficient regulatory clarity and markets are still confused, because that's what would be the case there. And then if that happens, and so, Attorney Jeremy Hogan said that regarding this topic, quote, likely the judge will not even address the issue, end quote. Now that's concerning. So this issue that could prevent XRP, technically cause or prevent XRP from being relisted by various exchanges, Attorney Hogan is concerned that it's not even going to be addressed. Now he does share some hope, though, that there may still be a path forward despite that being the case. And then also Attorney Bill Morgan, member of the XRP community, says that he thinks that Judge Torres has actually publicly already indicated that she's not going to address this. So I'll break it down, though. It's not a complete doomsday thing, so I'm not trying to get anybody all worked up or anything like that. But let's just live in reality and understand that there is a possibility that we could really end up with an outcome that's just going to piss us off as a community. Like, that is possible. Before going any further, I do want to be clear. I do not have a legal or financial background of any kind. I am not offering legal or financial advice. And you definitely should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say or write. I'm just an enthusiast who enjoys making YouTube videos about crypto-related topics, but just as a hobby and just for fun. All right, so here's what Attorney Jeremy Hogan shared with the community on Twitter. He wrote, "There has been discussion about how/if secondary market sales of XRP will, or won't, be addressed in the Ripple case. It's important because we are only confident XRP will be relisted on exchanges if the issue of whether XRP is inherently a security is addressed. Although the SEC's lawsuit contains language suggesting that XRP itself is the security, like a share of stock, the SEC's requests of the court in the lawsuit does not request anything that would confer this status on the assets." Yeah, it's positive, and that's absolutely true. If you ask the SEC, are we going to do anything of the sort, claiming that XRP itself is a security? The SEC attorneys, those little asshat pricks, they would say, no, of course they're not. But then if you look at what they're actually arguing, the arguments they make in the case, including the embodiment theory, they are arguing just that. We know that for sure. We're not stupid. They're not fooling us. But it's just kind of like gray area where perhaps because they're not technically addressing it, could they somehow actually get away with this? And it is ridiculous, as Attorney Hogan points out here. He says, "Because it's ridiculous, but I digress. The problem is that it is likely the judge will not even address the issue since it's not explicitly raised by the plaintiff. And although you could argue that it's thereafter addressed by omission, would that be enough for the exchanges? We don't know. But there's hope. First, Ripple could obtain agreement from the SEC to include, or the judge could approve language provided by Ripple in its proposed final judgment that the judgment does not cover secondary sales." Yeah, and I'll just pause to note here, that's kind of like what happened with the library case, right? So I think that was a bad ruling, but library lost, I think it was the beginning part of November last year. And then when it came to the remedies portion, the judge has articulated that secondary market transactions actually are not part of they're not covered by his ruling. And so the question is that the type of language that's going to be sufficient to, make sure that exchanges in the U.S. have confidence regarding the listing of any asset that's in such a situation? Well, that's a question mark, especially if it's XRP, which has already been delisted by just about every exchange out there in the United States, right? And this is something that could happen here. But anyway, Attorney Hogan continues. Kick Interactive got the SEC to allow the language below about continuing sales. And here, I'll just make it full screen. I'm not going to read this, but for those of you that care, this is a screen grab from that Kick Interactive case. And feel free to pause right here and read it if you care to. But just for the sake of time, I'm just going to keep chugging along here. Since you get I'm just trying to get the ideas across here. And then Attorney Hogan says, second, the judge could address the concerns raised by numerous amici in regard to secondary sales, including those championed by XRP holders led by Attorney Deaton. So I'll just pause to note here. This has been my strong suspicion. Because if you look at how Judge Torres allowed John Deaton, representing over 75,000 XRP holders, and you look at how she was willing to accept all 17 opposed amici that applied, and I think ultimately it may have been only 15 that actually did the file, but she approved. She said, yes, all of you can. All 17 of you absolutely jump on in here. Well, doesn't that indicate something? Well, at a minimum, she wants to be well informed. But in what ways will her ruling impact non-parties? Because again, the Michi, they're not part of the actual lawsuit itself. They're friends of the court, quote unquote. That's what the whole amicus status is. So wouldn't you then think, because this has been my strong suspicion, and it seems like Attorney Hogan does seem to think it's reasonable as well. Well, doesn't that then mean that perhaps Judge Torres would address some of these secondary market transactions as a result of concerns articulated by those amici, the friends of the court? And then Attorney Hogan says, apparently the judge in the library case has agreed to address secondary sales at some level. We'll see. Yeah, and so just to be clear, what he's noting here is that in that hearing at the end of January that John Deaton was at, because he's also amicus in the library case, and he became that after library loss, so just for the remedies portion of the case. Well, Attorney Deaton was, thank God he was there, but he got the judge to say, yes, of course, this does not impact secondary market transactions, and indicated that's going to be part of the ruling. Now, the final ruling regarding remedies isn't out, so he could go back on what he said he was going to do, but that would surprise me. But technically, what Attorney Hogan right here is absolutely correct. We just have to kind of wait and see. And then Attorney Hogan says, and finally, the judge could be forced, if Ripple loses, to address secondary sales at the penalty stage when a disgorgement order would have to be drafted. Why? Because the judge must review the distribution of disgorged profits for fairness. And so the court must delineate who receives the funds taken from Ripple. It's at this point that Ripple can argue that only actual purchasers from it directly, and not secondary purchasers, should receive their investment back. This is required by the SEC v. Wang case. Okay, so it's pretty clear what he's saying right there. There are other ways for Judge Torres to address this issue, and might have to, frankly. So think about how this would play out, though. So say Ripple actually loses, and there's no sufficient clarity regarding the actual status of XRP. Like, what the hell is XRP? Is it a damn security by the nature of it existing? Well, we know the answer is no, but still, if there's not that clarity as a result of this, that could mean some very bad stuff in terms of XRP price action. That's what I'm worried about. I do not want that to happen. Now, in theory, though, given that such a situation would force this type of talk, it seems, when it comes to the remedies portion, and who knows, maybe that's a month after the conclusion of the case here. It could be anyway. Well, if that happens, then in the meantime, we're just kind of in no man's land and price plummets perhaps, which would be, I'd be so pissed off if that happens. But the good news might be then, since this would have to be addressed, that there could be clarity provided for XRP, all the secondary transactions not included. That would be pretty damn clear, right? And then the question still would be, okay, but would that be enough for exchanges to relist XRP? So you can see where Attorney Hogan's going here. And then he says, the court would likely agree, otherwise the disgorgement would become so diluted due to the large amounts of secondary sales that any individual purchaser would receive pennies or less on the dollar. Yeah, can you imagine that? So let's say that all secondary market transactions are included in this, because again, let's just imagine there's disgorgement. So Ripple's got to give all the money back that they took in. So what's that? Literally everybody that's ever transacted on the XRP ledger. Are we serious about that? Are you kidding? Like, what? You serious, Clark? Like, no, that would be so ridiculous. It would render any sort of resolution just completely useless, for one thing, and then for a second, I can't imagine that that's the conclusion that they come to. So if it just goes to parties that directly interacted with Ripple, well, that would send a pretty clear message, secondary sales not included. And then so Attorney Hogan says, voila. So we'll see what happens. Ultimately, Attorney Bill Morgan read this thread, and he shared some additional thoughts here, and he wrote the following. The judge was clear in the Daubert motion decision on the issue she needs to decide. And let's pause a note as a reminder, the Daubert motion, that's what happened, the judge ruled on in the beginning part of March, which market participants saw as a very big positive, and XRP price started up, shoot on up not long after. And that had to do with the expert witnesses, and it was just an absolute beating against the SEC. The SEC really took it. Like, they really got a beat down there. And Ripple had some major wins. And so that's what he's referencing here with the Daubert motion. And so then Attorney Morgan says, this issue was the basis on which she decided to permit or disallow expert evidence not on XRP in secondary market trading. I hope she addresses the issue of whether XRP itself is a security. Yeah, and I'll pause a note too. If you look back to the library case, if she pulls what the judge did in that case, the judge refused to say what XRP is because he stated that he wanted to take a minimalist touch effectively, something to that effect. So, but still, think about it though. It's not necessarily the end of the world, because even if Judge Torres won't say XRP, of course, is not a security, it's never the asset. So even if she wants to take more of a minimalist approach, if she just notes that secondary market transactions, of course, aren't, well, duh. Because then that would mean, think about this logically, if the asset itself is always a security, then it would be the case that every single transaction, it would logically follow that every single transaction, including on secondary markets, would be illegal securities transactions. So just use that little logic train, and you can figure out why this should be positive and good enough for exchanges to relist here. But here's also what, actually, let me share. This is a little screen grab here, which reads as follows, and this is from the judge. The issue in this case is whether defendants offered to sell or sold XRP as a security. So that's from Judge Torres regarding the Daubert motions. Again, the issue in this case is whether defendants offered to sell or sold XRP as a security. And so then Attorney Morgan says, but I am concerned she has indicated she will not, meaning she will not articulate whether XRP is or is not a security. And then Attorney Morgan says, look at it this way. If Ripple loses and you get to penalties and disgorgement by Ripple of profits on XRP sales, the judge may consider if XRP is a security. I think that was the point Attorney Jeremy Hogan was making. But look at it another way. If Ripple wins on the main issue the judge defined in the Daubert motion, whether Ripple's sales of XRP were investment contracts, and she finds they were not investment contracts, then she doesn't need to decide if XRP per se is a security. XRP could hardly be a security itself if Ripple's sales of XRP were not found to be sales of securities. And that's, again, logic train, perfectly follows. So again, it's not that there's no hope. It's just that, there's tons of hope. I'm very optimistic, just to be super duper clear on this. But I think that we do need to be aware of some potential pitfalls, because if things really don't go the right way, if they don't go the way they should, we as XRP holders could take yet another beating. And that would just be one of the most offensive things I've ever experienced in my life if that happens. It really would. It would be, because it's that stupid, it's that wrong, it's that anti-investor, which is ridiculous because the SEC is supposed to be protecting the investors out there and helping regarding capital formation, and just doing the opposite on both fronts. Just like, nah, screw the little guy. We don't need to worry about that. No capital formation here. Screw investors. That's basically the approach that they're taking here. It's not about adding clarity or protecting anyone. They just don't care. So it's possible that, once we get this ruling, depending on how this goes down, what Judge Torres says, XRP doesn't get relisted on exchanges. Although even if that is the initially what occurs, if you look at, again, what Attorney Hogan said, depending on how it goes down, even if that's initially what happens and you see the price of XRP plummet, you don't see it get relisted. Once you get to the remedies portion, even if we have that disaster scenario, there's yet another chance for things to turn around. I hope it doesn't come to that. I don't know. I'm not pretending to. I will be endlessly pissed. I will be furious if that happens. Like I'll just start screaming into the microphone on my YouTube channel. Emotions. Not literally, but I will be absolutely furious if that happens. Because look, I've got a substantial chunk of my personal net worth invested in this, and I know what's right. I know what should happen. But if they're gonna treat us like that, and then to go through all that, and then to not have clarity one way or another from our legal system on what XRP actually is in terms of whether or not it is or is not a security. Oh my God! Like, what could possibly be more offensive than that? It's just ridiculous. So let's hope it doesn't go there. You know, so let's not be too fearful. But let's just be aware. Yes, it's possible we could have to deal with this. I'm optimistic, and hopefully it's reasonable optimism I have that we're not going to have to deal with that. But we all going to find out together, aren't we? Let me know what you folks think. I would love to hear additional perspective on this, seriously, because that's why I'm looking at it. Just let me know what you think. Let's keep the conversation going. I'm not a financial advisor. You should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say or write. That would be a very, very, very bad idea. Until next time, to the Moon Family Sedan.